Okay. Let's go to the telephones. And first up, from Beaufort, North Carolina. Now, I understand that it is Beaufort, South Carolina, but it is Beaufort, North Carolina. And at any rate, it's Barry. Barry, did I get that correctly?
Yes, you did, Beaufort.
Beaufort,
it's
all right.
Halfway between South Carolina and Virginia on I-95, and you get out of your car and you walk east till your hat floats.
Okay.
That's where it is.
That's where it is. All right.
If you want a quick and easy drinking way to get here.
All right.
It occurred to me, I've never heard any, and I'm going to try to do this in a real nice Southern way. Mm-hmm. I've never heard anybody call you a disgusting human being before.
Well, you haven't been talking to Mrs. Liddy.
Well, I'll tell you something. I hesitate to call you a disgusting American because I do share an awful lot of disdain for you and what you seem to stand for,
okay,
and what you do over the airways of this country in behalf of what is clearly a closed-minded personal faction of yours.
Faction?
Yes.
Well, could you clarify that a little bit for us?
Factionists are people who put self-interest in front of national interest. And James Madison had a lot to say about it in Federalist 10, as you'll recall.
All right.
The thing, on a personal basis, and maybe you're not all these things, but you do a good job of acting like you are if you're not. But to have sat at the government trough for all those years that you did, and then come back and say all these awful things you're doing about our country, and that you and your buddies in your particular little sliver of a faction have the best way to handle America, in spite of the fact that America's might and greatness in the face of the world, if you'll get far enough away from the globe, is in its cultural diversity.
Well, let's examine the several points that you made there, seriatim, if that's all right. Now, first of all, if I understand you correctly, you believe that I or anyone else who takes a position politically differing from yours is a factionalist.
Yes.
Well, would it be fair to say that you, having a position different from other people, there being no universal position so far as I know, you too are a factionalist?
The only universalist position I want to claim is this. I'm a liberal to my bone marrow. And the reason why, in the classical tradition, if you look up as simply as in Webster's dictionary and look deeply enough into the liberal definitions, I am a person who is tolerant of the views of others. And I think in today's terminology, we've been missing it by the privatization of the election process we've just gone through.
Well, now, let me ask you, the views...
Everybody who isn't a liberal is intolerant, if you want to say it that way.
Okay, well, let me ask you this question. Now, the views of the late Adolf Hitler are rather well known. Are you tolerant of those?
Well, no, I'm not. And I would have been one who would have shot him down.
All right, well, fair enough.
But I'm saying as a factionist, he has to be controlled. History shows that he was. It was not a pretty way to get rid of that factionalist philosophy of his. And I see the same thing being engendered in this country.
What you're saying is that you are tolerant of the views of those persons with whose views you agree.
Well, I don't know. This is a grand country. Can anybody?
Well, yeah. I mean, you and I are, and I guess everybody that's listening to us are certainly in agreement that this is a grand country.
Yeah.
Now, where do we go from here?
Well, okay. The White House was shot at this weekend.
That's correct. Okay. For the second time.
In my opinion, that is because of the encouragement and foment that has been generated by your show, Rush Limbaugh's show, Mr. Helms's congressional club. I'm saying the privatization of the election process, which was never anticipated by the founding fathers. We have been we put Bill Clinton and whoever else on the shelf, just like we do corn pops and Rice Krispies. Whoever can market it best is the one that's going to win, and I think that is not the American way. So I think what's going to happen, like Mr. Madison says, is that the factionists have to be controlled, and I'm going to have to lump you in there with all the rest of them who are making a lot of noise right now. And I'm glad that we've got enough time between now and the election to watch what's going to happen.
Okay. Well, now may I ask you for your evidence? Can you point to any time when I or Mr. Limbaugh or Mr. Helms or anyone else you care to name?
Well,
at any time have we suggested to the people of this country that it might be a good idea to shoot at the White House?
Well, no, I'm not saying that, Mr. Liddy. You're not telling anybody to do that any more than I'm predicting assassinations in the next months of people who are going to cut their mama's welfare check off, for instance, if it comes to that. I'm just saying that we have not been able to work these factions. They've always been handled in some way that plays them down. The general constitutional notion is that the factions are something that had to be dealt with. The two ways to get rid of them, depriving them of liberty, which you had to do to everybody, that costs more than the cure. I mean, the cure costs more.
Well, as long as you have differing views, you're talking about everybody.
Well, okay, here's an attitude. Let me just say this. Mm-hmm. You say something about Bill Clinton or Clinton. It is, I know, airtime is expensive, but in this country, I don't know why it would be wrong to say President Clinton. It's wordy. It takes up more newsprint. Attorney General Janet Reno rather than Reno, Miss Reno. You know, I can talk about those kinds of economies, but they don't say much of. This is a respectful country. We've tried to be respectful of other people's.
Well, you're right.
It's not our business to go over in Russia and try to cure all their ills.
Now let me ask you this: if you have an individual in an office, do you admit of a distinction between the individual and the office? In other words, is it possible to be respectful of an office, but not respectful of the individual holding that office?
Well, I think we already have a commitment to that in the Secret Service that goes with him everywhere. But as far as generating an attitude that he is not above anybody, any other American, even though he's sitting in the chair in the White House, he's done some very fine things for this country in his own way.
What?
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 Well, he's established a spending cut right now by what he's doing right now. Everybody says, well, he's not doing anything. He's just responding to the Republicans. He's making sure that you guys are going to go beyond that. They don't call him slick for any,
Okay, well, we've established that he's slick, and I agree with you.
Well,
he is.
Yeah, and also health care. To bring that to the focus and hear all the people who don't want it to change at all because they're making a killing just the way it is. They don't want it to change at all. Okay?
I
think he put it in a machinery.
I think that you will find. I think you will find it was Harris Wofford who first brought the health care traffic.
I'm saying the attitude. My main concern today is that the proliferation of people who are disrespectful of the American way, when in fact the thing that made us great was our cultural diversity, and now you try to go out there and say these
with all due respect, sir, with all due respect, I would suggest to you that the thing that made us great was the fact that although we came, all of us immigrants to this country, or our forebears, from many cultures, that cultural diversity, when we got here, we welded ourselves into Americans, and we celebrated our Americanhood or Americanism, not our hyphenatedism. I would suggest to you that this celebration of cultural diversity is divisive and is not what made this country great, and is what is at the root of an awful lot of the trouble in this country today.
That is your opinion, and I'm going to say this.
Well, yes, sir, but will you admit that your opinion is your opinion?
And see if that isn't the most noticeable difference in us and others.
I beg your pardon?
I say that has to be big because that is the biggest difference between us and others. We've become the world's policemen. People hate that. They really don't like that. Wouldn't you rather it be some other country, Mr. Liddy?
Would I rather be what?
Would you rather it be another country? Name the country you would rather see as the world's policeman.
I don't want to see any country as the world's policeman.
We don't have a choice. Somebody's going. You're.
You think that we don't have a choice? Do you think that it was absolutely ineluctable that we send those people down to Haiti?
I think it was a statement of philosophy. And I think that it was...
What was the philosophy? Marxist? Because after all, Mr. Aristide is a Marxist.
We're in a new world now. For the first time ever, we've been able to have the centralization of a power that can virtually control the rest of the world.
Well, we had that before. You had that in the Pax Romanum in the Roman Empire. You had
Never
it in the
had
Pax
that, Mr.
Britannica.
Liddy. We couldn't lob ICBMs into Podunk, Egypt.
No, but you could send the Roman legions into Podunk, Egypt, and they did.
Small, and we're talking on satellite right now. I'm just saying it's a different kind. It's a different ball game. All I hear about
it is only in quantity, not in quality.
Well,
Alexander conquered the known world.
It's different. It's different.
What's different?
The world is different. We've never seen it this way before.
Yes, and it's going to be, and it is going. It was different
before.
It was different before. It will be different tomorrow.
Yeah. I mainly call that.
What is that? What is that other than
a human being?
That I understand that.
Because I just don't think it's right for you to do this. You're playing on people's minds who don't have the time to work. To make up their own mind. You're planning these kinds of things in there, these disrespectful things. You're trying to create a situation of instability in the White House, the actual governing center of this country.
Sir, the White House does not need my help to be unstable. I mean, you've got Bill and Hillary Clinton in there. That's quite enough without
I can tell you don't like him very much.
I have no respect for either one of them.
Well, I don't know. I don't think either one of them's a convicted felon, are they?
No, they're not. Not yet.
Well, I think it's just
that remains to be seen.
I'm tolerant of this. Somebody has put up enough money to put you on the air. I think it's just a strange time in America when we put criminals on the air and make them heroes.
Well, Infinity Broadcasting does that all the time,
that's
sir.
That's not what the country
Infinity
says.
Broadcasting is the felon's employer of choice.
Well, maybe so. But I'm just saying
anybody in Infinity Broadcasting who is not a felon will be a felon shortly.
Let's say this. Cameron was a real nice guy, by the way. But
no, he's going to be a felon too.
Just because I liked him.
He's going to be a felon too.
Well, it's I've thought about saying this for a long time because it doesn't. If I'm number two behind that other guy you just said who was Bill Clinton's only supporter, I'm proud to be number two. But I think Hillary and Chesley would have something to say about that. But
well, I don't know about Hillary.
You shouldn't do that. You really shouldn't do that. I just think it's awful that you're doing that kind of stuff. That tactic that is building on people's fears. That liberal views.
Now, you don't think that after
school with blacks,
sir? No, wait a minute. You don't think that after reading Hillary's 1,342-page socialized medicine thing that people have reason enough to be afraid of Hillary Clinton without relying on me?
No. You're a dangerous man, my friend.
Oh, yes, I am a dangerous man. There's no question about that.
Whoever fired those.
Matter of fact, Theodore H. White, who is a prominent historian, said that I was the most dangerous man in America.
Well, I don't know. To hear you say that you are kind of makes me consider the source.
All right.
Well,
but you can't have it both ways. Either I'm a dangerous man, sir, or I am not.
Direction, and it doesn't inspire unity, which is on all our coinage. I just think I don't think it's good.
You don't think what is good?
I don't think your attitude and the character assassination that has been recent in the election to a sitting president.
Sir, I
just don't think that.
Did I invent Hillary Clinton's turning of $1,000 into $100,000 through the assistance of Tyson's Foods?
Well,
did I make that up?
You're making a lot of money right now entertaining people in the name of statesmanship. You're not making a single bolt or a nut in a factory. What is your product except ire and venom and hate?
My product is enlightenment. My product to a modest degree.
Yeah, you're selling your soap on your commercials, and that's fine too.
To slightly have something to do with, I hope, what went on the 8th of November.
The blood that's going to be on the streets, and I'm fearful of this, is going to be on the hands of...
Sir, you want to know why there isn't going to be any blood on the streets? Because Bill Clinton's a coward. When he had the chance to wear his country's uniform and actually get into battle, he ran away. And before there'll be any blood on the streets, Bill Clinton will run away again.
Do you believe in your heart this? Let me ask you this question.
Yes.
Do you believe that it's necessary for a doctor to have first been a practicing nurse before he can be a doctor?
A practicing nurse? No.
If Bill Clinton had his early calling that he was going to put himself in a political statesmanship situation, he was going to be a career politician, if you will, if you have to. Is it absolutely necessary for you to have done that?
No.
It's disgrace not to have served in the military.
It's a disgrace to have avoided military service the way he did, and then to compound what he did, to go to a foreign land and to demonstrate against the better men than he from his generation who wore his country's uniform and were dying face down in the mud for their country. That, sir, is inexcusable.
No. I don't know how to respond to that. But
Well,
I don't know if it's true. I wasn't there, and you weren't either. But
what do you mean I wasn't there? I wasn't at the Battle of Waterloo either, but I have a pretty good idea that it occurred, sir.
That somebody saw, and you know.
You don't think he demonstrated?
I don't know that.
He's admitted it.
Fine. I mean, that's okay with me too. I don't think I burned my draft card after I served my military service, but I was thinking maybe I don't know where it is, maybe, but I don't think I did. But I'm just saying.
You had military service, sir, which is something that Mr. Clinton did not.
If he chooses to be a statesman, is it necessary that he go put in 2 or 3 years somewhere to prove that he is a real American?
Sir, I mean, all I can suggest to you is that if you look up that dictionary that you are so fond of, you will not find the definition of statesman to equal draft dodger. Unfortunately, sir,
we're term.
Yeah, we're unfortunately going to have to go to some. We're going to have to go to the crass commercial messages, sir, because we're going to bring in someone who is even more liberal than are you, Mr. Lanny Davis. Oh, yes, sir.
Give me my phone number.
All right, we'll do it.
Okay, my friend, you're still disgusting.
Okay.
Okay, bye-bye.
And you're still a liberal.
This is the G. Gordon Liddy Show.
We are back here at Radio Free DC, the G. Gordon Liddy Show. And earlier today in the review and comment on the news, I was cut off short by the automatic music that comes at the end of the hour before I had gotten very far into a very important piece in the Wall Street Journal. And I have just received a fax from the author of that piece that gives additional information. And so what I think I will do now, because I think this is very important, is I want to read this to you, and then I will go into the facts from the author of the piece in today's Wall Street Journal, whose name is Jim Bovard. Mr. Bovard, as regular listeners will remember, has been several times a guest on this show. FBI Director Louis Freeh last week announced that no FBI agents would be fired or severely punished for their role in the botched attack on Idaho white separatist Randy Weaver and his family in 1992, which led to the death of Mr. Weaver's son and wife. The announcement, which drew denunciations from both the American Civil Liberties Union and the National Rifle Association, is the conclusion of a patchwork of deception that has continued for more than 2 years. Mr. Freeh, in his statement on Friday, declared that, quote, the Randy Weaver case crisis was one of the most dangerous and potentially violent situations to which FBI agents have ever been assigned, end quote. Well, I can tell you, having been an FBI agent assigned to some, hairy stuff, that's not true. But this is patent nonsense, right, Mr. Bovard? Given the growing importance of this case, a review of the facts is in order. Randy Weaver lived with his wife and 4 children in an isolated cabin on Ruby Ridge in the Idaho mountains, 40 miles south of the Canadian border. Mr. Weaver did not favor violence against any other race, but believed that the races should live separately. Because of his extreme beliefs, he was targeted for a sting operation. In 1989, an undercover agent of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms approached Mr. Weaver and pressured the mountain man to sell him sawn-off shotguns. Mr. Weaver at first refused, but the agent was persistent, and Mr. Weaver eventually sold him 2 shotguns, thereby violating federal firearms law. By the way, I understand what happened was the agent showed him exactly where he wanted them sawn off, which happened to be 1/4 of an inch too short. A court official sent Mr. Weaver a notice to appear in court on the wrong day. After Mr. Weaver did not show up on the correct date, a Justice Department attorney who knew of the error got a warrant for his arrest. Federal agents then launched an elaborate 18-month surveillance of Mr. Weaver's cabin and land. Now remember, this is a warrant for failing to show up on the wrong day for his arrest. And this is what they did. David Niven, a defense lawyer involved in the subsequent court case, noted later, U.S. Marshals called in military aerial reconnaissance and had photos studied by the Defense Mapping Agency. They had psychological profiles performed and installed $130,000 worth of solar-powered long-range spy cameras. They intercepted the Weaver's mail. They even knew the menstrual cycle of Weaver's teenage daughter and planned an arrest scenario around it. On August 21st, 1992, 6 heavily armed, camouflaged U.S. Marshals sneaked onto Mr. Weaver's property. 3 agents threw rocks to get the attention of Mr. Weaver's dogs. As Mr. Weaver's 14-year-old son, Sammy, and Kevin Harris, a 25-year-old family friend living in the cabin, ran to see what the dogs were barking at, U.S. Marshals killed one of the dogs. Sammy Weaver fired his gun in the direction the shots had come from. Randy Weaver came out and hollered for his sons to come back to the cabin. Sammy yelled, "I'm coming, Dad," and was running back to the cabin when a federal marshal shot him in the back and killed him. Kevin Harris responded to Sammy's shooting by fatally shooting a U.S. Marshal. Federal agents falsely testified in court that the U.S. Marshal had been killed by the first shot of the exchange. Evidence later showed that the Marshal had fired 7 shots before he himself was shot. After the death of the U.S. Marshal, the commander of the FBI's hostage rescue team was called in and ordered federal agents to shoot any armed adult outside the Weaver cabin, regardless of whether that person was doing anything to threaten or menace federal agents. Thanks to the surveillance, federal officials knew that the Weavers always carried guns when outside their cabin. With the massive federal firepower surrounding the cabin, the automatic weapons, the sniper rifles, the night vision scopes, this was practically an order to assassinate the alleged wrongdoers. 400 government agents, 400, ladies and gentlemen, quickly swarmed in the mountains around the cabin. Most important, the federal agents at that time made no effort to contact Mr. Weaver to negotiate his surrender. The next day, August 22nd, Randy Weaver walked to the little shack where his son's body lay. As he was lifting the latch on the shack's door, he was shot from behind by FBI sniper Lon Horiuchi. As he struggled back to the cabin, his wife, Vicky, stood in the doorway, holding a 10-month-old baby in her arms and calling for her husband to hurry. The FBI sniper fired again and hit Vicky Weaver right in the temple, killing her instantly. Mr. Horiuchi testified in court that he could hit within a quarter of an inch a target at a distance of 200 yards. Reuters reported on August 25th, 3 days after the shooting, quote, FBI agent Gene Glenn said that the law enforcement officers were proceeding with extreme care, mindful that Weaver's wife Vicky and 3 remaining children were also in the cabin. Quote, we are taking a very cautious approach, he said in a statement to reporters, end quote. An internal FBI report completed shortly after the confrontation justified the killing of Mrs. Weaver by asserting that she had put herself in harm's way, the New York Times reported in 1993. Though federal officials now claim that the killing of Vicky Weaver was an accident, the Washington Times' Jerry Sieper reported in September 1993, quote, court records show that while the woman's body lay in the cabin for 8 days, the FBI used microphones to taunt the family. Quote, good morning, Mrs. Weaver. We had pancakes for breakfast. What did you have? Asked the agents in at least one exchange. End quote. Neither Randy Weaver nor Mr. Harris fired any shots at government agents after the siege began. Mr. Weaver surrendered after 11 days. An Idaho jury found him innocent of almost all charges and ruled that Kevin Harris's shooting of the U.S. Marshal was self-defense. Federal Judge Edward Lodge condemned the FBI and issued a lengthy list detailing the Justice Department's and FBI's misconduct, fabrication of evidence, and refusals to obey court orders. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to interject here that there is a distinction between the FBI's hostage rescue team, and these were the miscreants who did all this stuff, and the regular line FBI agents. I used to be in the regular FBI. They didn't have any hostage rescue team then. And they ought not to have a hostage rescue team now. They need hostages rescued. You can call in Delta or the SEALs. They know how to do it. Justice Department officials launched their own investigation. A 542-page report was completed earlier this year that recommended possible criminal prosecution of federal officials and found that the rules of engagement, quote, contravened the Constitution of the United States. Yet Devil Patrick, Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, rejected the findings last month and concluded that the federal agents had not used excessive force. FBI Director Louis Freeh concluded that there was no evidence to show that Mr. Horiuchi intended to shoot Mrs. Weaver. Yet Bo Greitz, the former Vietnam War hero who represented the government when it finally negotiated Randy Weaver's surrender after the death of his wife, declared that the government's profile of the Weaver family recommended killing Mr. Weaver's wife. Quote, I believe Vicky was shot purposely by the sniper as a priority target. The profile said, if you get a chance, take Vicky Weaver out. End quote. Mr. Freeh justified the FBI shooting of the Weavers because sniper Horiuchi, quote, observed one of the suspects raise a weapon in the direction of a helicopter carrying other FBI personnel. But other federal officials testified at the trial that no helicopters were flying in the vicinity of the Weavers' cabin at the time of the FBI sniping. One of the most disturbing aspects of Mr. Freeh's slap on the wrist last week is his treatment of Larry Potts, Mr. Freeh's pick as acting deputy FBI director. Mr. Potts was the senior official in charge of the Idaho operation and signed off on the shoot without provocation orders. Despite the finding by the Justice Department that the orders violated the Constitution, Freeh recommended that the only penalty Mr. Potts face be a letter of censure, the same penalty Mr. Freeh received when he lost an FBI cellular telephone. The Weaver case is by far the most important civil rights, civil liberties case the Clinton administration has yet resolved, and it resolved it in favor of granting unlimited deadly power to federal agents. If the new Republican congressional leaders let the Justice Department and the FBI get away with what may have been murder, they will be accomplices to a gross travesty of justice. And this fax is just in from the author of what I have just read. There is one key fact on the FBI and Randy Weaver which I was not able to verify until after the deadline for the story in today's Wall Street Journal. The FBI's pattern of deception continued even with its official press statement last Friday. The FBI claimed that Weaver had been convicted of the original weapons violations charge. Actually, an Idaho jury ruled that Weaver had been illegally entrapped and instead convicted him only of failing to show up for the trial in 1991. It is amazing that the FBI has been examining and rehashing this case for over 2 years and still cannot even grasp the simple facts of the jury verdict. Oh, my. Ladies and gentlemen, it is quite clear that Larry Craig is right. We must have Senator Orrin Hatch's Judiciary Committee, and for that matter, maybe a joint committee with the House Judiciary Committee, which has oversight over the FBI hostage rescue team and over the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, to have oversight hearings into this case, the Waco case, and the terrible other incidents of abuse by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. The case in Pennsylvania and in Ohio, where people who've never been charged with anything, where they went in and slammed a pregnant woman up against the wall so she lost her baby. Another time when they trashed a man's cancer medicine, stomped his cat to death as they went out. This sort of thing has got to stop, ladies and gentlemen. And something else that is very troubling, and that is the illegal use, violating the posse comitatus statutes of U.S. armed forces in these things. There were Delta Force people at Waco, and they used Army tanks. That's a violation of law. It is against federal law for any U.S. military to in any way train any law enforcement personnel. That's got to be looked into and stopped immediately. All right. Let's see. We'll take a commercial break now, and then we'll go to your telephone calls and faxes on any subject. Stay put. All right. Here is the Take No Prisoners editor of the Washington Times, Wesley Pruden. And he says, Newt, is no doubt naughty on occasion, but the great debate over whether Hillary or Connie is the bitch and who said what to whom is a milestone in the nation's march toward equality in all things. Change, as either Bill or Miss Hillary could tell you, is not easy. Some of our ladies still want to hide behind their skirts even when they're wearing pants. This is in part because cussin', like telling jokes, is something few women do well. We can make allowances for a dog trying to preach or a clergyman walking on his hind legs, as Dr. Johnson suggested, but not every woman can be Roseanne Barr. This puts feminists in pursuit of manly attributes in the dilemma of the dog who couldn't be broken from chasing cars until the day he caught a 2-ton truck. The dog was very surprised. Like her famous son, Newt's mom seems unable to meet a television camera she can leave alone. And like any discussion about men and women and how they do what they do to each other, this one quickly leaped the beltway. Some women, eagerly seeking the offense, took the wrong moral from it. Quote, "There's no question that when you're a strong and forceful female, some people will use anything they can to put you down," says Marcia Murphy, who just completed a 4-year term as county executive in a Kansas City suburb. Quote, "You have to try to not let it get to you," end quote. Linda Bloodworth Thomason, the television producer, Murphy, Brown, and Designing Women, and once close pal of the Clintons, who has done as much as anyone alive to cheapen and vulgarize America, deplores the cheapness and vulgarity of it all. Quote, "I deplore the use of that word because it's a bankrupt way to put down women in general," she says. Charlene Muhlenhard, an associate professor of women's studies at the University of Kansas, thinks the B word is particularly bad because, it says here, nobody knows what it really means. Quote, "It's derogatory, but it's so vague there's no way to respond to it." Ms. Muhlenhard is no doubt protected from the coarseness of men, secure in the shelter of the Women's Studies program, and good for her. Otherwise, she would know that most men and women who do not know how to define bitchiness nevertheless recognize it when they see it. Indeed, if any of the gossip is true, Bill and Miss Hillary often have discussions, usually with the high decibel enthusiasm with which they calculate all manner of statecraft, on the subject of bitches and bastards, and who is one and who is not. Such discussions are not unknown, in fact, in places where other men and women meet for the exchange of domestic intercourse. Women untouched by coarse human hands imagine that men don't have insults for each other. Quote, "Some of the most disparaging remarks about men," declares a columnist for the Kansas City Star, "question their manhood when they show a lack of aggression rather than too much," end quote. Alas, Rogers and Hammerstein to the contrary notwithstanding, not everything is up to date in Kansas City. Quote, "It's not just that they don't like you or what you have done," says Marjorie Kaplan, superintendent of the Shawnee Mission School District. "It's related to your gender." She really means sex, not gender, and it's a pity that such a prominent educationist should abuse the language in the current fashion. But Superintendent Kaplan is wrong on 2 counts. Men do indeed put each other down with vulgar insults, regularly describing, ladies, cover your eyes, meanly ambitious or malignantly aggressive men as sons of bitches, or the even more colorful rectal aperture. This is usually accompanied by a suggestion that the SOB or the RA perform an anatomical impossibility on himself. Such vulgarity is always offensive to civilized ears. And if you believe that language matters most, as wise men and women do, it's no coincidence that the destruction of civility and manners in American life followed the coarsening of the glorious language of poets and kings. The language of the street, the pimps and the whores, and the crack dealers has replaced it as standard English. There are men still alive who remember when gangsters, lawyers, and other cutthroats blushed and mumbled embarrassed apologies when they caught themselves saying rude things in the presence of strange women. But now life's a bitch, and the rapster sharting his screed that all women are hoes may merely be auditioning for poet laureate of the land. So why shouldn't the Speaker of the House call the First Lady of the United States a rude name? This is an equal opportunity age, after all. You could call Newt's naughtiness affirmative action. Oh, my. That Wes Pruden. Oh, boy. Actually, this book, Silent Coup, is probably the definitive one on Watergate, but there has been a recent discovery of a document that showed rather definitively, who knew what when in the White House. And that was, I thought, quite good. Because Dean, it was very interesting what Dean did. Dean called me immediately Monday morning. This thing went south on the
Friday
evening, Friday, Saturday night,
June 17th.
And Monday morning, I was promptly summoned over to Dean, and he said, we can't talk in here and everything. We have to go outside, and we're sitting in the back of in the park and what have you.
Now, let me interrupt. Now, that's not when you were going to kill him with a pencil.
No. That was later. That was later.
In the jugular.
It was in a special prosecutor's office. that was.
Incidentally, they searched me for sharp objects before I came in here today.
Well, but they can't take away your wit, see, and that's how they can never disarm you.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
That's all right. I gave him all the information, and I figured, all right, he will give that information to his client, the president. And he gave it to him 9 months later. He turned my report into a message to Garcia. That's what happened there. But in any event, the pencil thing, that was a wholly different deal. That was after he was being held up north in some military base up here. I was in the can, and he was being limoed down to do his work in the prosecutor's office. And I had long since refused to cooperate, and I was jailed. But every time they would get a new special prosecutor on the staff, he would think, well, I'm morally and professionally bound to at least try to get Liddy to talk. So they'd haul my butt out of whatever can they had me in at the time and bring me down there, and they'd give me a sandwich and ask me again, and I'd tell them no again, and back I would go. Well, this one time they came in and the guy was busy or something. They said, well, just go in there. There's an empty office in there. Just go in and sit down in there. I went in. It wasn't empty. John Dean was in there. That was the one that they'd assigned to him. And it passed through my mind, I wonder if this is a complex plot to have me eliminate Dean, which I could have done very easily by simply picking up a pencil and putting it, through his brain. And I guess he saw my face, what was going through it, and he just turned absolutely white. And just ran out of the room, just took off like a scalded-ass dog. So that was what that story was all about. I guess anything that goes along that is politically in the news is subject not only for you but for the political cartoonists and for everybody else. It's fair game. It's fair game. I don't see how anybody has any right to be upset or to be
they did, though, in those days. I was working at the Shoreham Hotel, and on any given night, the audience was divided right in half, and fights would literally break out, disagreeing with this material. Let me ask you, I know that you asked the questions here, but there's a side of you that I don't think anybody knows about it, and it's in your book. Now, I haven't read the book in years and years, but I remember the funniest thing where you're in the Slammer here in D.C., right? Now, you hint around in the book that you have a good singing voice, a trained, as I remember,
actually,
tenor voice.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I studied under the same fellow, Stoffel Pescia, in New York, to whom Dorothy Kirsten had gone in Rome when he was in Rome. And the problem was he tried, I was not a tenor. I was baritone, and he wanted to make me a tenor. And that just didn't work.
Could have done it with a pencil.
Or a sharp blade. But it didn't work. But at any rate, that's true.
So you're in the Slammer.
Yeah.
Now you're surrounded by these hard-time thugs in the Washington, D.C. jail.
Yeah.
Tough guys. Career criminals.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to show them that you're not afraid of them.
Well, it wasn't exactly that way.
You walk to the shower.
Yeah, that's
Could you pick it up from there?
Well, okay. Well, you have to remember, Sirica put me in the D.C. jail because as it was then constituted, it was 104 years old then.
Yeah.
They had hanged one of the conspirators in the assassination of Abraham Lincoln in this thing. That's how old it was.
Yeah.
And the conditions were deplorable. It was the subject of a subsequently successful action by the American Civil Liberties Union Prison Project to have, the thing shut down. But nobody cared because everybody in there was black. And who cared about black people, And so he put me in there, and that was to intimidate me because I was supposed to be scared to death of black people. And I wasn't, and they weren't particularly impressed with me either. I was just there. And then someone decided that I guess I was supposed to be intimidated and everything, and they started calling me names and things like that. But, you get through that phase when you're in schoolyards. So I actually made an etiquette mistake, and this is serious. I was an athlete in school, and we used to just dress and undress and everything else like that, in the lockers. I mean, it didn't mean anything to be naked in the locker with a bunch of guys, and I was also in the armed forces, I was in the Army. Didn't mean anything. And so it was my turn to take, I guess we got a shower 3 times a week, and they said, okay, you can, go down there. Well, I walked buck-ass naked down to the shower. And I did not realize that this was a cultural insult.
It's against prison etiquette to do that.
It is against prison etiquette to do that. Yeah. I was supposed to have wrapped my nakedness in a towel, which never occurred to me. Yeah. So, that got them all worked up, and they're starting to call me all kinds of names and everything. And it got very racial. They were being very racist in what they were yelling at me. And finally, I just got fed up with it. And I said, okay, you want to be racist? I'll give you a race. And so I started to sing the most racist song that I could think of, which was the Horst Wessel-Lied, Die Fahne hoch in German. And, of course, none of these guys understood a word of German at all. And here I am bellowing out this horrible song, which, for those of you who are too young to know, was the party anthem of the Nazi Party in the Third Reich. I mean, that's how racist it was.
And how did you happen to know that?
How did I happen to know that? Because when I was a little boy, I lived, prior to the Second World War, in a town that was created for ethnic Germans who serviced the ocean liners coming from Germany over to the United States and the Graf Zeppelin, the Hindenburg. And the church was German. They imported the pastor, everybody. And it was very convenient to New York City. It was right across the river. The British liners and the Italian and the French were there in Manhattan. The German, Europa and Bremen and the rest of them were on this side. So I had all of these little friends who were German. Everybody was speaking German. It was before the war. And we had a maid who was an 18-year-old unlettered German girl who was absolutely enamored of Adolf Hitler and used to listen on the shortwave radio. We had an old Emerson shortwave radio, and my father kept saying, turn that stuff off, but she would listen, and I was in her charge, and so I would hear all this stuff, and these guys singing all these songs and everything, and I, knew
As
German.
I remember, the melody is beautiful. I mean, it's not Deutschland über alles.
No, Deutschland
which is acceptable today. I mean, that's the good one.
Well, the melody is, but not the lyrics that they used in those days. Yeah. Because they had I probably deliberately misunderstood it, but Deutschland über alles meant, in German historical context, a reference to the fact that the Hochstaaten, the city-states of Germany, were the last to combine into a nation-state, after France and after everybody else over there in Europe. And they had suffered before they became a nation-state because they were divided, and they meant Germany, the concept of Germany over all the individual Hochstaaten. But everybody understood it to mean Germany over the whole world, Nazi conquest, such and such. Yeah. So to this day, they don't sing those words anymore because they get people upset. But that is not the song that we're talking about. The song that we're talking about was properly called Die Fahne hoch, which means raise the banner, and it was popularly called the Horst Wessel-Lied. It was the anthem of the Nazi Party. And she would listen to that, and she was finally dismissed when my father came home one day, and the mailbox was stuffed full of Nazi Party literature that she had sent to the embassy for.
Now, this is in New Jersey.
This is in New Jersey.
She'd run through the house saying, Bruno Hauptmann is innocent.
Of course. Of course.
Well, now...
However, you know who the chief of New Jersey State Police was who led that investigation?
Schwarzkopf.
The father of the great Desert Storm hero, H. Norman Schwarzkopf.
H. Norman Schwarzkopf. Well, we don't want you to... What I'm getting at, could you sing something? The listeners maybe not do not know this about you. And
you want me to sing
You know who
something?
else sings? Another arch conservative who sings publicly once a year, Robert Novak, at the Gridiron.
I'll be darned.
He has a tenor voice. The two of you ought to make an album.
Boy, that'll be the album from hell. I tell you that.
I know the listeners would love to hear just a couple bars, just
Well,
to,
let me see.
just to confirm this.
What? I'll tell you.
Something
What? Let's see. Well, let's try something from Carousel.
Okay, they want to break first.
They want to break. All right. Well, we'll
Okay.
break and then we'll
What's the song
set
from
this thing up.
Carousel?
How about If I Loved You?
Let me.
And if you don't.